The persistent rhythm of rain drumming against the expansive windows of the mansion resonated through the quiet corridors of Alexander Sterling's estate. The grand Victorian-style mansion, perched on the fringes of London, stood as a testament to the wealth and influence of its affluent inhabitant. Alexander, a 36-year-old man characterized by his aloof demeanor and emotional distance, dismissed any notion of sentimental distractions. He constructed his investment empire through unwavering discipline and laser-sharp focus, leaving no space for emotion. To some, he was a figure of admiration. To others, he instilled fear. His notoriety as a merciless individual, in both his professional dealings and personal affairs, was well known before he even arrived. Alexander had a penchant for control. Every aspect of his life was carefully arranged, from his multimillion-dollar investments to the tiniest details of his mansion. Yet this control rendered him alone. The barriers he built to shield his emotions also distanced him from everything around him. His existence, marked by a series of meetings, business dinners, and challenging choices, was on the brink of transformation. Isabella Clarke, 25, had recently secured a position as a maid at Alexander's grand mansion. In a modest setting, she spent her childhood in a quaint rural town, taking on responsibilities early on to support her ailing mother. She possessed a fragile beauty, her brown, wavy hair encircling a gentle visage. Yet what truly captivated Isabella was the subtle power that lay beneath. In her gaze, there was a fierce resolve shaped by life's lessons, a steadfast refusal to surrender, even when chaos threatened to engulf her. Isabella stepped into the mansion on a dreary, rain-soaked day, her heart constricted with anxiety. She was largely unaware of her new superior, aside from the whispers that circulated. An aloof, detached figure who remained uninvolved with his staff. To her, that was of no consequence. Her sole desire was to labor and support her mother. Upon her first arrival at the mansion, she was met by the housekeeper, the no-nonsense and capable Mrs. Thorne. Isabella adhered meticulously to her instructions, fully aware that even a minor error could jeopardize her position. In the initial days, she familiarized herself with the household routine, diligently attending to the cleaning, organization, and ensuring that everything remained immaculate. Unbeknownst to her, Alexander seldom paid attention to the nuances of his surroundings. Yet, during the third week of my efforts, an unforeseen event occurred. Alexander seldom found himself at home throughout the day. His office was situated in the heart of London, and his obligations often drew him away for extended periods. However, that afternoon, an unforeseen storm compelled him to call off a crucial meeting and head back home ahead of schedule. Upon stepping into the mansion, he came face to face with Isabella for the very first time. She knelt on the floor of the expansive hall, meticulously polishing the immaculate marble with her gloved hands. Alexander halted briefly, taken aback by her unexpected presence. Initially, she was oblivious to his presence, completely absorbed in her tasks. He lingered, observing her for a brief while, taking in the meticulous attention and commitment she poured into her task. Yet his familiar chill reemerged. "May I inquire about your identity?" His voice pierced the stillness, resonant and commanding. Isabella, taken by surprise, sprang to her feet, nearly losing her grip on the cleaning supplies. For the first time, her gaze locked with Alexander's. He was even more formidable than she had envisioned. He stood tall in an impeccable suit, his serious expression and piercing gaze making her feel diminutive in his presence. "I am Isabella, sir," the new maid responded, her voice slightly trembling as she endeavored to mask her anxiety. Alexander squinted, as though he were evaluating her closely. "Ensure you stay out of my way," he stated icily, before pivoting and striding towards his office, cutting the conversation short. Isabella inhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief wash over her as the fleeting interaction came to an end. Yet, a lingering discomfort resided within her. In Alexander's gaze, there lingered an elusive quality, a certain something that she found difficult to define. He was indeed rude, yet within his gaze lingered a hint of loneliness that intrigued her. prompting her to ponder what lay concealed behind that facade of indifference. In the days that followed, Isabella and Alexander found themselves crossing paths in the mansion's corridors, each encounter marked by a fleeting and formal exchange. Though he never displayed rudeness, the gap between them was unmistakable. He appeared distant, as though he resided in a lofty realm that kept others at bay. Isabella moved through her tasks with a gentle demeanor, yet every fleeting interaction sparked her curiosity. Gradually, she started to observe subtle nuances. The infrequency of his smiles, the shadow that crossed his eyes with frustration during phone calls, and the pervasive sense of solitude that clung to him, even amidst opulence. Behind the chill, there lay a deeper mystery, one that Isabella, perhaps unwittingly, found herself drawn to explore. To Alexander, Isabella was a puzzle waiting to be solved. She performed her duties quietly, without seeking connection, and he valued that. Yet, there was an undeniable allure in the manner she held herself that captivated him. She possessed a serene quality, an understated grace that left him pondering what set her apart from those in her vicinity. She neither adored him nor feared him, yet she made no effort to win his affection. Amidst the weariness of his monotonous existence, this subtle change started to draw his focus, despite his reluctance to acknowledge it. Yet for a man who had shut himself away from the world, recognizing emotions marked the beginning of turmoil. The days at Alexander Sterling's mansion unfolded in their familiar cadence. Yet with each passing moment, Isabella sensed the growing intensity of her boss's presence. It was peculiar how, despite the limited dialogue, he commanded the atmosphere. Alexander was a quiet tempest. His chill needed no biting remarks, merely his existence, which appeared to stifle any effort at intimacy. Isabella pressed on with unwavering commitment, while Alexander regarded her with the same detached indifference he showed to all those in his orbit. To him, Isabella was merely another element in his meticulously orchestrated existence. He had opted for a life devoid of connections and warmth, for to him, emotions represented vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities were perilous. They stripped away concentration, and concentration was all Alexander possessed. Yet gradually, an imperceptible shift started to unfold. On a chilly morning, Isabella, tidying up Alexander's office, spotted a book left on his desk. It was far from the sort of reading she envisioned for someone of his caliber. Rather than a financial report or any discussion on investing, it was a timeless classic, Wuthering Heights. Isabella paused briefly, her innate curiosity taking hold of her. As she opened the book, her eyes landed on a bookmark nestled on page 87. The excerpt illuminated themes of love, solitude, and the harsh realities of feelings. Caught her off guard. Just as she was about to shut the book, the sound of determined footsteps drew near. As Alexander stepped into the office, his gaze was drawn to her first, then to the book she held tightly. Isabella stood still, aware that her inquisitiveness could lead to a scolding. "What are you up to?" he inquired, his tone subdued yet unmistakably uneasy. I found myself tidying up and the book lay open, sir. I didn't mean to," Isabella stammered, attempting to clarify her actions while returning the book to its rightful spot. With a measured pace, Alexander drew near, gently lifting the book and shutting it with intention. The stillness that hung in the air was thick with unspoken words. He observed her intently, and Isabella sensed her heart quicken. The unease hung in the air, yet beneath it all, there was an elusive quality, a sensation she struggled to define. Their gazes locked, and for an instant, Alexander appeared to lower his defenses. Only for a moment. "Curiosity can lead to peril, Miss Clark," he remarked at last, his voice adopting its customary icy tone. Isabella bowed her head, her cheeks flushed with a deep sense of embarrassment. "Apologies, sir. It won't happen again." He stepped back, a hint of satisfaction in his expression, yet something in his eyes contradicted the calmness of his words. An internal conflict appeared to unfold, as though he was attempting to uphold his customary detachment, yet somehow found himself being drawn out of his safe space. "You are free to go," he declared at last, gesturing dismissively. Isabella exited the office quietly, her heart pounding in her chest. She was aware that she hadn't crossed a significant boundary, yet she sensed that something had shifted in that fleeting exchange. The appearance of the book, Alexander's demeanor, and the way he appeared more approachable than normal. Isabella felt an intriguing shift in his demeanor. She was uncertain whether it was mere curiosity or if something more profound was stirring within her, but his reaction, even if frigid, captivated her attention. Alexander, however, couldn't dispel the unsettling sensation that the encounter had instilled in him. He occupied the remainder of the day in meetings, attempting to push aside the emotions swirling within him. Isabella resembled the other employees he had collaborated with. Yet, ever since she stepped into his home, her presence had been unsettling him for reasons he couldn't quite grasp. Throughout the years, Alexander had mastered the art of distancing himself from any form of emotional engagement. His personal life mirrored his business, meticulously managed, thoughtfully planned, and reliably consistent. Feelings unsettled the balance, and he was determined to keep everyone out of his meticulously crafted realm. Previously, when he had let someone in, the pain had been profound, leading him to promise himself that he would never repeat that error. Yet Isabella appeared to navigate those defenses effortlessly. He found himself captivated by an undeniable quality she possessed. Perhaps it was her composed approach, effortlessly going about her tasks without any need to seek his approval. Perhaps it was the subtle power she held inside, a quality that both fascinated him and stirred a sense of unease within him. He understood the importance of maintaining his space. He understood the peril of allowing someone to get too close. Yet, the reality was that despite his best efforts, thoughts of her lingered in his mind. In the week that followed, destiny brought them together once more. On a Friday afternoon, Alexander arrived home sooner than he typically did. The relentless downpour and tumultuous traffic in London forced him to cancel yet another appointment. Upon stepping into the house, he caught the sound of voices drifting from the kitchen. Intrigued, he trailed the noise and discovered Isabella conversing with Mrs. Thorne, the housekeeper, as she completed the arrangement of the dinner table. It was a typical household moment, yet there was an undeniable quality that compelled Alexander to linger and observe far longer than he intended. He was completely unaware of the profound impact that seemingly simple interaction had on him. Isabella's smile as she conversed with Mrs. Thorne, the meticulous arrangement of items, suggested that every detail held significance. It stood in stark opposition to the chill that enveloped his existence. In that moment, an unexpected yearning surged within him, a longing to immerse himself in something deeper, to experience a sensation that transcended the relentless apathy surrounding him. Before she could gather her thoughts, Isabella caught sight of him. The smile she had been offering Mrs. Thorne faded, giving way to a look of astonishment at the sight of him there, observing. Alexander, aware that he had been discovered, cleared his throat, attempting to mask his unease. "Mr. Sterling," Isabella remarked with a subtle bow, attempting to mask the nerves that the moment had stirred within her. "Isabella," he said, this time using her name, a gesture he had never made before. A stillness enveloped them, and in that instant, Alexander understood he was teetering once more on the brink of relinquishing command over his own existence. He ought to step away. He ought to adhere to his principle of staying uninvolved. For the first time in what felt like ages, Alexander experienced a sense of vulnerability, and that frightened him more than he was willing to acknowledge. That afternoon felt distinct from every other in the mansion. The rain, once a gentle patter against the windows, now poured down with a fierce intensity, mirroring the tempest of emotions swirling within Alexander. The individual who had consistently upheld his composure, who had never permitted feelings to sway his decisions, was starting to sense the fissures in his facade. In the days that ensued after their fleeting meeting in the kitchen, Alexander became more and more unsettled by Isabella's presence. She persisted in her efforts with unwavering commitment, upholding the professional boundary he appeared to favor. Yet, There was an undeniable quality in the way they gazed at one another in this moment. He caught the subtle looks she cast his way, and despite his efforts to look away, his gaze inexplicably gravitated toward her, yearning to uncover the essence of her uniqueness. Isabella sensed the shift as well, yet she was uncertain about how to navigate it. From the moment she began her tenure at the mansion, it was clear to her that Alexander was a man who kept his distance. He exuded a chill, remained unyielding, and maintained a wall that separated him from those in his vicinity. Yet gradually, she started to perceive something different. He appeared so disconnected in his own surroundings, sidestepping any interaction that wasn't absolutely essential. It felt like Alexander was fleeing from a deep-seated turmoil within. She pondered what experiences might have shaped his distance. Despite her best efforts, she found it impossible to quell her curiosity and, even more perilously, the feelings of affection that were starting to take root. She understood the dangers of drawing near to Alexander, yet each subtle gesture and every word shared deepened a bond she found impossible to ignore. A week later, Isabella found herself in the mansion's garden, carefully pruning some flowers. The rain had ceased, and the afternoon unfolded with an unexpected brilliance of sunshine. She enjoyed her time there, surrounded by the greenery, as the garden was one of the rare spots where she felt entirely comfortable. Out of Alexander's sight, she found a moment of peace, allowing herself to momentarily escape the strain that lingered in the air between them. However, that day would stand apart. While she snipped the blossoms, the well-known sound of footsteps echoed behind her. As she pivoted, her heart quickened. He approached her with a deliberate pace, his hands tucked away in the pockets of his coat. He appeared more contemplative than normal, as though he bore a burden he was unsure how to manage. "Isabella," he started, his tone slightly gentler than normal. "I wish to have a conversation with you." She gazed at him, taken aback by his method. Alexander seldom took the initiative to engage in a conversation unless it was absolutely required. Isabella made an effort to regain her composure, brushing her dirt-streaked hands against her pants. "Absolutely, sir. How may I assist you?" she inquired, striving to maintain a composed demeanor, despite the rapid beating of her heart. Alexander paused, his silence stretching as he weighed his words with great deliberation. "I've observed that recently, our connection has shifted somewhat," he remarked at last. "To put it frankly, it irritates me." His words hit like a splash of icy water. Isabella experienced a constriction in her chest, apprehensive about what lay ahead. He had observed the shift, naturally, yet his tone suggested that this alteration was not a welcome development for him. "If I did something wrong, sir, I apologize," she said quickly, her heart racing with anxiety. "I had no intention of doing that." Alexander advanced. His eyes locked onto hers, and Isabella sensed the palpable tension building between them. He gave a subtle shake of his head. "Absolutely not, Isabella. You haven't made any mistakes. I'm at a loss for how to handle this situation." He paused, clearly uneasy when it came to expressing his emotions. "I'm not sure why I'm sharing this, but since your arrival, it seems like something has shifted. No matter how hard I attempt to overlook it, I simply cannot." Isabella was utterly taken aback by Alexander's revelation. She paused, grappling with the weight of his words. He was grappling with an issue, and for the first time he was candidly acknowledging it. "I wish to keep things simple, Isabella," he pressed on, his gaze piercing and brimming with inner turmoil. "Yet, despite my efforts to maintain my distance, there's something about you that challenges every rule I've established for myself." Isabella's cheeks burned as she cast her gaze downward, uncertain of how to reply. A portion of her longed to express that she shared those feelings. Yet another side recognized the peril that any connection with Alexander entailed. He held a position of authority, a figure of immense influence, and the gap between them was staggering. Yet, she could no longer ignore the undeniable presence blossoming within her. "Alexander," she said, her voice steady as she used his first name for the first time, causing him to raise his eyebrows in surprise. "I comprehend that this is intricate. It seems to me that there has been a shift. However, you hold the position of authority, and I'm uncertain about whether we should pursue this direction." He became quiet, taking in her words. Isabella was indeed correct, without a doubt. The dynamics between them were intricate, and any engagement could lead to repercussions. Yet Alexander, after a long stretch of years, was starting to experience an emotion that disrupted his typical detachment. He was uncertain about how to approach the situation, yet he was resolute in his desire not to overlook it. "It's complicated," he finally confessed, his voice now softer. "However, I cannot feign that everything is as it seems." Isabella gazed at him, and for a fleeting instant, she sensed the depth of his sincerity. Alexander, the one who had consistently held sway over every aspect of his life, found himself exposed in her presence. He was releasing his emotional guard, and it touched her profoundly. "Perhaps we ought to reconsider," Isabella proposed, striving for reason, even as her heart raced in opposition. "Maintain a professional demeanor." Alexander paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. All the thoughts swirling in his mind convinced him that this was the correct course of action. He ought to concede. He ought to uphold the distance he had always been adept at preserving. Yet he found himself reluctant to do so. For the first time, he yearned to delve into his emotions. "I can give it a shot," he remarked, a subtle smile playing on his lips that caught Isabella off guard. "However, I cannot guarantee that it will be a simple journey." Isabella offered a shy smile, and for a fleeting moment, the weighty tension in the air between them appeared to lighten slightly. Yet, they were both aware that this ceasefire was merely a fleeting arrangement. In the days that ensued, Alexander made a genuine effort to maintain his distance. Yet the emotional weight of that moment in the garden lingered on, influencing him deeply. He understood that Isabella was justified in her desire to maintain professionalism, yet each encounter with her stirred a sense of conflict within him regarding his choice. Conversely, Isabella endeavored to proceed with her tasks as usual, yet the sincerity of Alexander's words had profoundly unsettled her. Their emotions were at odds. They understood that any misstep could alter their lives forever, yet the pull between them was an undeniable force that, despite their efforts, they could no longer overlook. As they grappled with their inner turmoil, destiny appeared poised to step in, unveiling truths and conflicts that would compel Alexander and Isabella to confront the very issues they had been desperately evading. The days stretched endlessly, as though time itself were ensnared in a thickening atmosphere of anticipation. Isabella carried on with her routine, while Alexander endeavored to maintain the rhythm of his life. Yet, the reality was that everything seemed out of place now. The space they both endeavored to keep felt anything but organic, and that was evident to each of them. Each exchange between them was deliberate, calculated. Isabella kept her distance from Alexander, while he, for his part, worked hard to seem unconcerned. Yet, a mere exchange of glances was enough to resurrect all their conversations in the garden, saturating the atmosphere with an unspoken tension. During that week, the mansion welcomed an unexpected guest, one that took Isabella by surprise. It was Charles Beaumont, a longtime acquaintance of Alexander and a collaborator in business ventures. He possessed a captivating charm, was sociable, and radiated self-assurance. Charles's presence consistently stirred the dynamics of the household. Yet this time, Isabella sensed a distinct change. Charles appeared to take a keen interest in her, which left Alexander noticeably uneasy. Shortly after Charles arrived, a formal dinner took place at the mansion, a customary event during his visits. Isabella took on the responsibility of arranging the table, making certain that every detail was just right. Yet, there lingered an unspoken tension in the air, palpable only to her and Alexander. At dinner, Charles, ever the conversationalist, quickly turned his focus to Isabella, who quietly served the dishes. "Isabella, correct?" Charles inquired, his azure gaze fixed on her with a curiosity that left her feeling vulnerable. She acknowledged with a nod, striving to uphold a composed and professional presence. "Indeed, Mr. Beaumont. Would you like another glass of wine?" he suggested, attempting to guide the dialogue toward a more comfortable topic. However, Charles was not one to surrender without a fight. Please, there's no need to address me as sir. Charles is doing well. He smiled, yet his tone carried an undertone that hinted at a subtle flirtation. What is the duration of your employment here? Isabella cast a fleeting look at Alexander, who observed the exchange with an inscrutable demeanor. The air crackled with unspoken tension between the two men, a silent battle raging without a single word exchanged. A few months back, she responded, maintaining a neutral tone. Is there anything else I can get for you? Charles beamed, yet just as he was about to speak further, Alexander stepped in. Isabella has a lot on her plate, Charles. If you find yourself in need of assistance, I'm confident you can manage on your own. Alexander's voice cut through the air, unmistakably signaling that the discussion had reached its conclusion. Isabella, feeling a sense of relief, hurriedly departed. Yet she couldn't help but catch the glance Charles directed at Alexander. An unvoiced tension lingered, a rivalry steeped in history that had now emerged into the open. For the first time, Isabella understood that she was, in some way, at the heart of this unfolding situation. After dinner concluded, Isabella made her way back to the kitchen, attempting to concentrate on her duties, yet her heart continued to race. She found herself unable to shake off the memory of Alexander's reaction. Did he exhibit signs of jealousy? Could it be that beneath that frigid facade lay a man grappling with his own emotions? While she was scrubbing the dishes, the sound of determined footsteps echoed as someone entered the kitchen. As she pivoted, her gaze met Alexander's, who lingered in the doorway, his eyes locked onto her. The stillness enveloping them was thick, and Isabella sensed the atmosphere around her becoming dense. Is everything all right, sir? She inquired, attempting to ease the atmosphere, though her astonishment at his presence was unmistakable. Alexander moved cautiously ahead, an air of unease surrounding him, as though he were grappling with an internal struggle. Charles ought not to have addressed you in such a manner, he stated with conviction, his tone resolute. Isabella blinked, taken aback by the remark. He was merely exercising good manners. She attempted to minimize the situation, yet Alexander's expression revealed that he perceived it differently. Absolutely not. Alexander shook his head, clearly expressing his annoyance. He consistently behaves this way. He enters my home and attempts to overstep boundaries. Isabella gazed at him, seeking to grasp the source of his intense reaction. She understood that Charles had a penchant for humor, yet she was taken aback by the impact it had on Alexander. Do you feel envious? The inquiry slipped out before she had a chance to hold it back. Alexander fixed his intense gaze on her, holding her in a moment that felt suspended in time. It felt like he was weighing the extent of his disclosure. I'm not the type of person who feels jealousy, Isabella. His voice was soft, nearly a whisper, yet it carried a depth that revealed the impact it had on him. Yet with you it feels unique. The words lingered in the space between them, and Isabella sensed her heart quicken. She sensed an unspoken connection between them, but hearing Alexander acknowledge it, even subtly, took her breath away. Alexander, that's not. She attempted to articulate her thoughts, but he cut her off, closing the distance between them. I have made an effort, Isabella. I've made an effort to maintain my distance and uphold a professional demeanor, just as you advised. Yet, whenever I catch sight of you, whenever Charles or any other man gazes at you in that way, something within me stirs. He paused, inhaling deeply, as if wrestling with his own thoughts. The weight of my emotions has become impossible to overlook. Isabella became quiet, her heart racing to the point where coherent thoughts eluded her. The depth in Alexander's gaze was captivating, and despite her efforts to maintain composure, she felt her emotions teetering on the brink of spilling over. What is it that you wish for me to do, Alexander? She inquired at last, her voice trembling yet brimming with feeling. What are your expectations of me? He gazed at her, his eyes shadowed by the weight of the moment. I'm uncertain. I simply can't bear the thought of losing you. Please stay with me. His words came as a revelation to Isabella, one she had not anticipated. She understood that Alexander's emotions were intricate, yet she was unaware of the depth of his internal battle. "I have no intention of leaving, Alexander." His voice carried a gentle strength. "However, it's important to recognize that what we have here carries a certain level of risk. I can't allow myself to plunge without certainty that you'll be there to support me." Alexander advanced another step, his proximity leaving her breathless. "I'm ready to give it a shot, Isabella. I acknowledge my imperfections, yet I refuse to let these emotions overwhelm me any further than they already have." He took a moment, his voice now more gentle. "I desire your presence beside me." Isabella felt a sudden rush of emotion. For an extended period, she maintained her distance, seeking to shield herself. Yet, confronted with Alexander's openness, she realized she was prepared to embrace that leap as well. "Are we united in this endeavor?" she inquired, her gaze sparkling with a blend of trepidation and optimism. Alexander nodded, his gaze unwavering. In unison. In that instant, burdened by the truth of their revelation, Isabella realized that, amidst all the complexities, she was prepared to confront whatever lay ahead. At last, Alexander was prepared to unveil his emotions. And so does she indeed. The days after Alexander's revelation infused the mansion with a fresh ambience. Despite their awareness of the complexities ahead, an unexpected lightness lingered between them, a feeling that had previously eluded their connection. Isabella carried on with her duties, her commitment unwavering as ever. Yet, in the moments when her gaze met Alexander's, a profound understanding passed between them, a wordless vow that, regardless of the challenges ahead, they would confront them side by side. Yet, before long, the truth started to filter through the fissures of that assurance. Charles lingered in the mansion, and his offhand remarks started to irritate Alexander more than they ever had before. During one of the dinners, as they engaged in conversation about business, Charles made a remark that lingered in the atmosphere. "Indeed, Alexander, a maid like Isabella is truly a gem. Wouldn't you agree?" "Cheers!" Charles exclaimed, a playful grin spreading across his face as he lifted his glass of wine. "Smart, committed, and truly stunning. Finding individuals like that nowadays is quite a challenge." The remark was delivered with a playful air, yet all present sensed the underlying emotional intensity. Isabella, engaged in serving the meal, nearly let her plate slip from her grasp upon hearing Charles's words. Her cheeks burned, and she averted her gaze from Alexander, who stood quietly, his face set in a stern expression. However, what unfolded next revealed that a transformation was underway. "Charles, let's concentrate on the matter at hand and keep my team out of this," Alexander stated, his tone icy and resolute. He maintained his gaze on his friend, yet the menace in his voice was unmistakable. Charles lifted his eyebrows, unmistakably taken aback by the response. "Now, I had no idea you cared so much about your employees," he remarked, attempting to ease the tension with a strained chuckle. "I'm only teasing, Alexander." Yet Alexander remained silent. His intense stare remained fixed on Charles, signaling that this jest was unacceptable. Isabella experienced a blend of relief and unease. Alexander's jealousy was palpable, yet it only served to further entangle the situation. She understood that any further connection between them could spark rumors, and the last thing she desired was to become the focus of conjecture. After dinner, Isabella chose to step into the garden, seeking a moment of tranquility. The sky hung heavy with clouds, while a refreshing breeze whispered through the branches of the trees. She perched on a bench, arms wrapped around herself, lost in contemplation of the unfolding events. She understood that Alexander had stood up for her, yet she was also aware that they would soon confront the genuine trials that awaited their relationship. Engrossed in her musings, she suddenly became aware of gentle footsteps approaching from behind. She glanced over to find Alexander making his way toward her. He had swapped his formal suit for a lighter shirt, his gaze locked onto her, as if he were attempting to unravel the emotions swirling within Isabella. "I owe you an apology for dinner," he said, taking a seat beside her on the bench. "Charles crossed the line, and I should have prevented that from occurring." Isabella shook her head, making an effort to conceal the extent of her irritation. You defended him, Alexander. That's what truly matters, she remarked, her voice gentle yet resolute. Yet, she hesitated, searching for the perfect expression. This will undoubtedly present challenges, and we are aware of that. Alexander let out a deep breath, fully aware that she was correct. He understood that Charles was not the sole hurdle in his path. The world he inhabited, the disparities in rank, and the very lifestyle he had grown accustomed to, all of these would face scrutiny. I understand it won't be simple, he remarked at last, gazing up at the overcast heavens. Yet returning is not an option for me, Isabella. Not after all that I feel for you. Isabella's heart constricted at the utterance of those words. A fragment of her was apprehensive about the future, yet another part was irresistibly drawn to her feelings for Alexander. He was violating his own principles, and she understood the significance of that to him. I just don't want you to regret it, she said softly, her gaze averted from him. Alexander faced her, tenderly cradling her hands. The only thing I would regret is losing you, he replied, his gaze locked onto hers. I understand the challenges ahead, but I'm prepared to confront whatever comes my way. Isabella offered a faint smile, sensing the genuine nature of his words. It was difficult to overlook the extent of his vulnerability, the depth of his willingness to transform for her. In that instant, she realized she was ready to embrace that risk as well. Then let us give it a go, she concluded at last. But with caution, for Clara's well-being and for our own. Alexander nodded, a sense of relief washing over him at her choice. He understood that the path before him would be fraught with obstacles, yet for the first time in ages, he was ready to confront something with his emotions, rather than his reasoning. The grip he had valued was gradually loosening, and oddly enough, that didn't frighten him as much as it perhaps ought to have. The following day, Charles departed from the mansion. Their goodbye was quick, and while he kept his relaxed grin, Isabella sensed that he had picked up on the unease between her and Alexander. Charles was no fool, and she worried he would leave with more than just cherished memories of their time together. In the absence of Charles, the mansion settled into a serene stillness. Isabella and Alexander maintained their connection, sharing meaningful looks and tender words during quiet interludes. They seemed to be crafting a realm of their own, a sanctuary in the midst of the challenges they were aware would soon confront them. Yet what they failed to foresee was that the true challenge would arise from the most unexpected source. One morning, Isabella got a frantic call from her mother. The woman's voice trembled, laced with worry. Isabella, there seems to be an issue with our finances. The bank informed us that our funds are insufficient to cover our bills this month. Could you please come over here and check what's happening? Isabella felt a sudden flutter in her chest. The earnings she received from her work as a maid were consistently sent to her mother, and they had always sufficed to meet their needs. Yet, in an instant, everything felt amiss. She understood the urgency of her departure, yet she was acutely aware that it would challenge all that she had started to create with Alexander. If her family faced any financial difficulties, it would signify not just a personal upheaval, but also a possible divide between her and the realm that Alexander inhabited. For the first time, Isabella confronted a challenging decision: to prioritize her family's well-being and confront the unfolding crisis, or to preserve her relationship with Alexander, fully aware that it might jeopardize everything she was striving to protect. As Isabella strolled through the mansion's corridors, her mother's phone call reverberated in her thoughts. The shiver that coursed through her was a mix of dread and apprehension about what awaited her upon her return home. Her mind was a whirlwind, and the weight of maintaining order felt like it was suffocating her. Her family had consistently been her main focus, and until this point, her position at the mansion had enabled her to manage the household expenses. Yet, a shift had occurred, and Isabella found herself compelled to uncover its nature. She understood that she had to inform Alexander about her abrupt exit, yet the mere idea filled her with discomfort. What would his response be? Would he, accustomed to control and stability, grasp the urgency of the situation, or would he perceive her absence as a potential threat to their aspirations? As she approached Alexander's office, a brief pause enveloped her before she raised her hand to knock on the door. "Enter," came Alexander's authoritative voice from the other side. She pushed the door ajar to reveal him at his desk, enveloped by a sea of papers, his expression as grave as always. He lifted his eyes to her, and a gentle warmth flickered in his gaze. "Isabella," he said, his voice gentler than normal. "Is everything all right?" She inhaled deeply, striving to maintain her composure. "Alexander, I received a call from my mother. It appears that there are some issues with my family's finances, and I must go there to resolve them." Her words spilled out quicker than she intended, revealing her unease. Alexander paused, his silence amplifying Isabella's unease. He rose gradually, making his way toward her. "How long do you need?" he inquired, his tone steady yet devoid of any criticism. Isabella gazed at him, taken aback by the inquiry. He appeared neither angry nor anxious, merely earnest. "I'm uncertain. Could be swift, yet it may also require several days, depending on my discoveries." Isabella sensed the gravity of the words, the anxiety of slipping away from the grasp of everything unfolding between them. Alexander regarded her, his gaze evaluating the circumstances. "If you require additional time, feel free to take as much as you need," he said with a serene demeanor. "Isabella, your family holds great significance. I don't want you to feel pressured to pick between them and what we're aiming to create." Upon hearing this, she experienced a wave of relief wash over her. Her heart ached at the thought of departing from the mansion, even for a brief moment, yet the knowledge that Alexander stood by her side made the ordeal somewhat easier to endure. "Thank you, Alexander," she murmured gently. He nodded, moving closer, his hands resting softly on her shoulders. "If you require assistance of any sort, please feel free to reach out to me." His touch, soft yet filled with potential, conveyed a sense of hope. Isabella understood that Alexander was not one to make proposals without careful consideration. His willingness to assist her conveyed a depth of feeling that transcended mere words. "I'll fix it," she said, her smile strained. "I simply need to understand the situation at hand." Alexander observed Isabella for a moment, sensing the turmoil she was experiencing within. He recognized the significance of her family in her life, and while his desire was to have her close, he acknowledged that, at this moment, Isabella had to prioritize those who relied on her. "I know it will work," he said with a faint smile, taking a small step back. "Upon your return, I will be waiting here." Those words resonated deeply within Isabella. She understood that the emotions they shared were genuine, yet she was aware that in Alexander's realm, the absence of a person could be perceived in various manners. She wished, more than anything, that this brief distance would not diminish the connection they were forging. Isabella departed the following morning, exiting Alexander's mansion with a blend of unease and yearning. The trip back to her hometown stretched on, and with each passing mile, the burden of her responsibilities felt heavier. Upon her arrival, she discovered her mother in a state of concern, surrounded by a chaotic array of papers strewn across the kitchen table. Isabella immediately set out to uncover the truth behind the family's financial situation. After several hours spent poring over documents, she unearthed the unsettling truth. Her mother had fallen prey to a fraudulent scheme. An alleged investment firm had guaranteed rapid returns, and in a fleeting moment of desperation, her mother had placed her savings in their hands. At this point, the funds had vanished, and the financial statements were showing a deficit. "Mom, why didn't you share this with me earlier?" Isabella inquired, her tone heavy with exasperation and worry. "I hope to spare you any concern, my dear. I believed I was making the right choice, that I was putting resources into ensuring our future." Isabella felt her heart tighten as her mother's voice quivered, her eyes brimming with remorse. "We'll figure this out," Isabella declared, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling within her. "I assure you that I will discover a resolution." Yet, Isabella understood that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. She had already allocated the majority of her earnings to sustain her home, and now, with the burden of debt from the fraud, everything was hanging by a thread. She contemplated Alexander's offer of assistance, yet the notion of dragging his world into her personal dilemmas left her feeling uneasy. As the days went by and the debts kept piling up, Isabella came to understand that she might be left with no options. She confronted a challenge far more daunting than she had anticipated, and the thought of going back to Alexander's mansion without a resolution felt utterly unthinkable. Within the confines of the mansion, Alexander found himself passing his days in a state of unease. Even amidst his myriad responsibilities and bustling business, thoughts of Isabella lingered in his mind. Her absence, once bearable, now enveloped him in an inexplicable void that weighed heavily on his heart. He knew that his life, so controlled and organized, had changed since Isabella had entered it. What he didn't know was how to deal with this change. The man who had always avoided feelings and deep connections now found himself yearning for someone, something he never thought possible. On the third night after Isabella left, Alexander finally made a decision. He knew she wouldn't accept his help easily, but he also knew he couldn't let her face the storm alone. He picked up the phone and made a call. "Lucas, I need a favor," Alexander said, his voice firm. "I want you to find out everything about a fraudulent investment company. I have reason to believe they are involved with Isabella's mother." Lucas, her trusted friend and lawyer, asked her a few quick questions before promising to look into it. Alexander knew that with the right connections, he could find a solution to Isabella's problem, even if she didn't know it yet. As the night wore on, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years, anxiety that his help would arrive in time. He knew he was entering dangerous territory, but he didn't care. For Isabella, he was willing to take risks, and deep down, he knew that that decision, more than any other, would change everything between them. The days became an emotional roller coaster for Isabella. Back in her hometown, she was immersed in a sea of paperwork and bills, trying to figure out a way to save her family's financial stability. The revelation that her mother had been the victim of fraud had shaken the foundations of the household. The guilt and regret her mother felt were evident, and this only added to the pressure on Isabella. As she tried to control the situation, thoughts of Alexander kept running through her mind. She missed him more than she cared to admit, but the idea of involving the cold, powerful millionaire in her personal problems seemed too much. Alexander already had enough of his own responsibilities, and Isabella didn't want to be another burden in his life. However, what she didn't know was that Alexander had already gone ahead. Back at the mansion, Alexander spent his days and nights restless. He knew Isabella was strong and determined, but for him, that wasn't enough. He felt an overwhelming need to protect her, to make sure she wasn't swallowed up by a problem she hadn't caused. So he had called Lucas, his lawyer and longtime friend, to investigate the fraud. Alexander was not the kind of man she had expected. He liked to be in control of situations, and the uncertainty of what Isabella was facing made him uneasy. His connections in the business world, the influence he had cultivated over the years, might be the solution to her problem, but he knew Isabella would not accept his help easily. 3 days after the call, Lucas returned with answers. "I investigated the investment firm you mentioned," Lucas began, his voice serious over the phone. "They were already on our radar for being involved in fraud schemes. They scammed dozens of people, promising high returns and disappearing with the money." "And Isabella's mother?" Alexander asked directly. "She was one of the victims. But there is a chance of recovering some of the money," Lucas replied. "I am in contact with the lawyers who are trying to trace the embezzled funds. It will be complicated, but possible." Alexander nodded, his mind already working on the next steps. "Make sure her mother is a priority for getting the money back," he said. "I want everything done quickly." "Of course. I'll do what I can," Lucas confirmed. Alexander hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of relief and worry. He knew he had done the right thing, but he was worried about how Isabella would react. She was proud, and he knew that getting too involved in her problems could drive a wedge between them. But for him, it was a risk he was willing to take. The important thing right now was to make sure Isabella and her family were safe. Days later, Isabella returned to the mansion. The financial problems still hung over her family, but she had done what she could so far. She had found a temporary way to keep the bills under control, but the situation was still far from resolved. The weight of it followed her back, and as she climbed the stairs of the mansion, she didn't know how to explain to Alexander what was happening. She had expected to find the mansion as quiet as she had left it, but upon entering, she was greeted by the housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, who informed her that Alexander was in his study and wanted to see her as soon as she arrived. Isabella's heart raced. She knew this meeting would be different, fraught with truths she was not yet ready to confront. Entering Alexander's office, she found him standing by the window, his expression serious and thoughtful as ever. He turned slowly when he heard her enter, his eyes softening at the sight of her, but with a tension that suggested he knew more than she had told him. "How was the trip?" Alexander asked in a low voice. Isabella sighed, trying to remain calm. "It's hard. Things at home are complicated," she admitted bluntly. "My mother was the victim of fraud, and now we're struggling to keep up with the bills." Alexander nodded, as if he already knew what she would say. And indeed he did. He waited a moment before speaking. "Isabella, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice firm but careful. "I know about the fraud." Isabella's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean you know?" she asked, her defensive tone immediately emerging. Alexander took a few steps towards her, keeping his gaze fixed on hers. "I asked Lucas to investigate the situation. We discovered that the company that scammed your mother is already under investigation for other frauds. I'm working with lawyers to try to get the money back." Alexander's words were spoken with his typical calm, but Isabella felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "You did this without telling me?" Isabella's voice was full of surprise, but also indignation. "Alexander, this is none of your business. I should solve this myself." He took a deep breath, knowing his decision would not be well received, but remaining firm. "I know you can handle things on your own, Isabella, but I can't just stand by and watch. You're important to me. I can't pretend your problems don't affect me." The sincerity in his words made Isabella's heart waver. As much as she was furious that Alexander had gotten involved without consulting her, she also couldn't ignore what he was trying to do. He wasn't a man who expressed his feelings easily, and the simple fact that he had taken this step showed how much he cared. "Alexander, this is complicated," she said, trying to find the words. "I can't let you solve my family's problems. I don't want you to think I'm expecting you to." He interrupted her, his voice low and controlled. "I'm not solving this for you, Isabella. I'm solving this because I care about you, because you're part of my life now, and what happens to you affects me. If it were the other way around, you'd do the same for me, wouldn't you?" Isabella hesitated. She knew he was right. If the situation were reversed, she wouldn't stand idly by either. But it was hard for her to accept that Alexander, with all his wealth and power, was interfering so directly in her personal life. "I just don't want this to change what we have," she said, her voice soft but thick with emotion. "I don't want you to think I depend on you to solve my problems." Alexander took another step towards her, gently holding her face with one hand. "What we have doesn't depend on that. And I'm not here to be the solution to all your problems, Isabella. I just want you to know that when things get tough, I'm here. That's not going to change." Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. There was so much she wanted to say, so much she still needed to understand about herself. But at that moment, what Alexander was offering her was exactly what she needed: unconditional support. "I love you, Alexander," she said softly, finally letting the words slip out. Alexander smiled softly, bringing his lips closer to hers. "And I love you, Isabella. I'm not going anywhere." The kiss that followed was full of emotion and promise. Promises that no matter what challenges they faced, they would be together. And for the first time, Isabella knew with certainty that she had found a safe place in Alexander's arms. But as they surrendered themselves to the moment, they both knew the battle was not over yet. The future would bring new obstacles, new challenges, but now they were ready to face them together. The days that followed Isabella's return to Alexander's mansion were marked by an uneasy calm. Although she and Alexander had grown closer, sharing feelings that had previously seemed impossible to express, The shadow of Isabella's family's financial problems and Alexander's involvement in her personal life created an invisible tension between them. Isabella, though deeply touched by Alexander's help, still struggled with the feeling that her independence was at stake. Her love for him grew with each passing day, but along with that love came the fear of losing the essence of who she had always been, an independent woman, capable of solving her own problems. And now, here in the sprawling mansion, with Alexander taking control of her situation, she felt torn. Alexander, in turn, sensed Isabella's conflict. He was a man used to solving problems, making decisions, and making sure everything around him was under control. But for the first time, he felt like he was approaching a limit, a fine line between helping someone he loved and suffocating her with his domineering ways. He loved her deeply, but at the same time, he didn't know how to handle that love without seeming like he was invading her space. Yet, before they could confront this inner turmoil, the external world started to encroach upon them. One afternoon, while Isabella strolled through the mansion's gardens, absorbed in her reflections, an unexpected call broke her reverie. The number flashing on her cell phone was unfamiliar, but as she answered, her voice quivered upon recognizing the caller's identity. "Mrs. Clark?" The man's voice carried a composed yet official tone. "My name is John Reynolds. I represent the Financial Observer. I'm delving into a narrative surrounding the recent investment fraud that has impacted numerous families, and I've learned that you are connected to it. I would appreciate the opportunity to converse with you about the situation and gain insight into how it has influenced your family, as well as your connection with Alexander Sterling." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. What had once appeared to be a manageable issue was now starting to grow into something larger and more perilous. She understood that if her connection with Alexander were to be revealed improperly, it could trigger a storm of rumors and conjecture, affecting not just her life, but also Alexander's standing. "I have nothing to say about it," she responded, her tone resolute yet her heart racing. "My personal life is not for you to concern yourself with. I get it, Mrs. Clark, but chatter will happen regardless. It's best for your narrative to be conveyed accurately. Wouldn't you agree?" The journalist pressed on with a compelling demeanor. "I want to prevent any confusion and provide you with an opportunity to explain your stance." Isabella ended the call, a wave of panic washing over her. She realized that the impending situation could further complicate her relationship with Alexander, especially if the media began to investigate her connection to the fraud and, even more troubling, her ties to her superior. Without hesitation, she dashed to the mansion, swiftly ascending the stairs to Alexander's office. Upon entering, she found him on the phone, but as soon as he caught sight of her expression, he promptly ended the call, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" he inquired, rising to his feet. Isabella felt the words catch in her throat, but finally spoke. "A journalist reached out to me. They are aware of the fraud. They are aware of my involvement, and even more, they are aware of our connection." Alexander's brow furrowed, yet his face revealed no shock. He had encountered the media previously, but he understood that this level of scrutiny could jeopardize not just Isabella's privacy, but also tarnish his professional reputation. He would not let that occur. "I'll take care of it," Alexander declared, his tone steady and resolute. Yet, Isabella merely shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's not as straightforward as it seems, Alexander. They won't relent until they have a narrative. And if that narrative is misrepresented, they'll distort it completely. They'll claim that I'm with you for the money, that you fixed my problems because I'm just your maid. That will tear us apart." The weight of Isabella's words struck him hard. He understood that the media would eagerly seize upon their relationship, twisting it into a sensational narrative. Furthermore, he realized that if he wasn't cautious, Isabella might be perceived as someone leveraging her connection to him for personal gain. "You're not going to face this alone," he said, stepping closer to her. "We will face this together. Let's be truthful, ensuring clarity and avoiding any misunderstandings." "But what if this tarnishes your reputation?" Isabella inquired, her voice trembling as tears threatened to spill. "I wish to avoid being the source of any controversy. I don't want anyone to believe I'm exploiting you." Alexander grasped her hands, his gaze locked onto hers, radiating a tranquility that only he seemed to possess. Isabella, the opinions of the media and the world hold no weight for me. What truly matters is the bond we share. And no one, neither journalists nor gossip, can strip that away from us. Isabella inhaled deeply, attempting to embrace the strength Alexander was offering her. She understood he was correct. Despite the relentless pressure from the outside world, their connection remained genuine. She simply needed to have faith in it to endure the challenges ahead. The following day, Alexander and Isabella faced a tough choice and decided to grant a short interview to the journalist who had reached out to her. The plan was straightforward. They would steer the story. They refused to let rumors undermine them. Above all, they would ensure that the narrative surrounding Isabella's mother's deceit would not be manipulated to suggest she exploited Alexander's assistance. They convened with the reporter in a secluded cafe, shielded from curious gazes. Alexander, ever composed and measured, detailed Isabella's financial predicament and the impact of the fraud on her family. He took care to highlight that the bond between him and Isabella had developed organically, even prior to the emergence of the financial troubles. Isabella, in turn, shared her own journey, detailing her efforts to support her family and the significance of her work at Alexander's mansion. It was not merely about financial necessity. She had discovered a genuine connection with someone there. The journalist appeared taken aback by the candidness and straightforwardness of her narrative. He had anticipated a scandal, something that would generate sensational headlines. Instead, he discovered two individuals battling fiercely to safeguard their most cherished possession, their love. As the interview concluded, Isabella and Alexander emerged together, hand in hand, confronting the world with unwavering confidence. They understood the road ahead would not be simple, that obstacles still lay in wait, but they were prepared to confront them head-on. Together, as they stepped out of the cafe, Isabella glanced at Alexander, her smile brightening her eyes as she said, "I believe we can face anything now." Alexander returned the smile, gripping her hand a little tighter. United, forever. In that instant, they realized that despite every challenge, the bond they had forged was resilient enough to endure any tempest the universe presented to them.